Now, this man describes himself as completely client-driven. Daniel Morel is the chairman and chief executive officer of leading global digital agency Wunderman. He firmly believes the best path towards success is taking chances and being prepared for the outcome either way. He sat down with Mags on Media on a recent visit to South Africa. Let's engage, if we can, on this whole concept of big data. The point is made that smart brands these days are using a mix of data, big data, creativity and technology to be successful. What do you think that means?
If you believe that the Harvard Business Review is setting the tone for anything marketing, then you have the front cover of January, big data. You have the cover of March, marketing 2.0, advertising 2.0, and it's all about big data. And everybody has a slightly different definition of what big data means. I mean, for us, it's a combination of not every possible source, but only the meaningful sources that help you paint a complete profile of the consumer. So for us, is the aggregation of what we've been wrestling with on our mainframe for the past 20 years, which is the large behavioral data. More and more the real-time data that you got from the bits and bytes and the crumbs that we leave on the surface of the internet. That's a second source. The third source would be your media consumption, and possibly more and more the real-time transactional data. So the aggregation of all those sources of data gives you a real-time painting of the consumer. And the magic when that's happening right now is the fact that you can connect with those consumers in real time and you know where they are. Almost a dream come true. Eh? And many brands, I mean most of the smart brands, as you said, are now coming to realize, even on the retail side, which doesn't use data, like the large enterprise brand in technology or in car or in banking, many of those retail brands, those fast-moving consumer brands, are now realizing that if they want to regain the direct connection with the consumer, they have to know more about those consumers beyond the retailers, so they're aggregating data right now. So an interest for those smart brands to get familiar with.
You sit in the agency part of this equation. What questions should brands then be asking of their agencies in respect of big data and managing that information?
What we tell clients is that there's a huge difference between practicing data and owning data. The ownership of data makes a huge difference. And we have at WPP data sitting on our computer, sitting in our basement. So the daily conversation that we have with data, the seriousness that we have in handling data is critically important. When you go to a client and say, oh, don't worry, we are going to get data from a third-party supplier, we are first-party owners of data. And by the way, when the current crisis blows over and the US legislator come about deciding what do we do about data and data security, you want to be a first-party owner of data. When you have that first-party relationship with the consumer, that's going to be critically important. So what we tell clients is that we have first-party relationship with the consumer because we own their data and we own the permission to connect with them. And then we are asking them, what do you have on your side? What talent do you have on your side to connect with us and make that dream come true? That's critical. And many of those brands don't have necessarily inside. They're coming from the media side.
That's
they're coming from the creative side.
Brands up to this challenge, though. That's the disconnect, surely.
It is a huge disconnect. I mean, many of the clients that we talk to are asking us, can you lend us people? Can you come, on site? Can you help us, establish those trainings? Sometimes establish those platforms. Help us, decipher through the maze of data that we have what's important and what's not important. But we found that, especially on the brand, which have been doing broadcast for as long as they've been in existence, the data culture is not yet there. So it's critically important to have an advocate within the company and make data a corporate asset.
Let's talk a little bit about the consumer interface now as far as the ownership of this data is concerned. You make the point, or Wunderman makes the point, that this has gone beyond cell phones, for instance. Kiosks, cars, opening the door to ongoing conversation between brand and consumer. To what extent is that happening and changing the consumer dynamic that we operate in?
Well, I mean, it's a concept of mobility. It's not necessarily your cell phone, but you're watching the soccer game on a large TV screen. You step out because you have to pick up your daughter, out of a dance practice, and you get into your car, and immediately your car knows that you're coming in, and you've been watching that program. So immediately on your car screen, you can see the second half of the soccer game, and then you leave the car and you go. It's the device following your activity, and I mean, that's almost true. It is becoming that. So it's the concept of the consumer constantly on the move and having the selection of device and the brand having to follow the consumer through all the stream of device that the consumer is using and be constantly relevant and be able to interact with the consumer when the time is right, when the customer has made the choice to be interrupted and connect with the brand.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, when the time is right, when the consumer chooses to be interrupted. Because I would ask you, when is enough enough? Surely we get to a point where there is too much conversation. There's an overload.
I don't think so.
Well, you would say that.
If you provide value,
Well, it depends on your definition of value, doesn't it?
Well, if you send me a coupon on the latest Manolo Blahnik shoes, I'm not interested. So for me, you're harassing me. I don't care about it. Okay. If you send that to my girlfriend, she's gonna like it. If you send me something about diving and motorcycling, I'm gonna pay attention. So for me, it's not interruption. You're giving me value. So that's where you go back to the concept of knowledge of the customer. If you know what they're interested in, if you have the idea of their full profile, then you know that you can interrupt them with valuable information. But if you send them something that's completely off base, then it's harassment and then they're going to shut you down. So the idea of connecting with the consumer with value-based information and interaction is critical.
Question of time and tone.
Absolutely.
Your agency, the group more broadly, is very optimistic about the potential, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and in Central Africa.
It is a critical next frontier for us. WPP as a group has been quite successful in the BRIC market, in what we call the next 11 market, and I think what's happening in Eastern and Sub-Saharan Africa,
BRICS, though, isn't it?
Absolutely, moving beyond the BRIC, beyond the next 11, and the Eastern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa are the next frontier for us. It is not an easy market. We have a good position in South Africa. We have a network that's developing on the back of large clients such as MTM and Standard Chartered Bank. It is a large population of young customers, so car, cell phone, banking product, mortgage, housing, all that comes with the youth of the population. And many of the large brands, whether it's a Microsoft, the Nokia, and the Ford, are entering this market.
In spite of the inherent risk that is attached to that.
If you want growth, okay, where do you want to grow? If you tell your stockholder, listen, I'm flat in the US, I'm slightly down in Europe, they're going to say, okay, that's fine. But if you're not growing in the emerging market, if you're not growing in Eastern Africa, then you've got a big problem. So you have to be there.
So, two big global views on brand communication, and that ends this week's program. Goodbye to you, and thank you for watching.
That moves. ENCA.com.